after 21 days, America finally has a Speaker of the House of Representatives. His name is Louisiana Republican Congressman Mike Johnson. He claimed the gavel this afternoon. 3 other GOP nominees in waiting, Steve Scalise, Jim Jordan, and Tom Emmer, each failed to unite the Republican Party. All of them are better known than Johnson, with also large factions of Republican dissenters aligned against them. What does all this mean? Well, one might suggest this is the consensus of the exhausted. House Republicans simply got tired of fighting with one another in this protracted conversation about who would the next speaker be. It also might be a reflection of something that Matt Gaetz said today, that MAGA is ascendant in the House of Representatives. And Gaetz has a particular point of view on this, since he is the one who helped engineer the ouster of the previous House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. One other thing might be observed. Former President Trump cannot necessarily elect a Speaker of the House, but he can diselect one. And for that proof, all you need to do is check in with Tom Emmer of Minnesota, who only yesterday afternoon was the most likely Republican to claim the speakership until Trump said he was opposed to him. And very shortly thereafter, Emmer withdrew. CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us now with her perspective on what can only be described as yet another dramatic, but in this case, conclusive day. Nicole?
Yeah, and certainly a collective sigh of relief in the chamber on both sides of the aisle, although certainly there is a big task ahead for this new speaker, Mike Johnson. But look, this was a very exhaustive process, as you just laid out, and really paralyzed the House for the better part of 3 weeks, where they have not been able to do any work, any business, because of this stalemate over a House Speaker. Already, the House has moved forward, for instance, with a resolution on the floor to condemn Hamas following the deadly attack in Israel. And of course, there are a lot of big questions that remain in terms of what next steps Speaker Johnson may take with respect to that aid package, for instance, that President Biden has now sent to Congress, which includes funding requests for Israel, for Ukraine, Taiwan, the U.S.-Mexico border. Will he keep it intact? Will he try to split it apart? That remains to be seen. Also, his approach to potentially preventing a government shutdown next month. Johnson has made clear that he does want to accelerate the appropriations process, but whether that can get done by the middle of November, which is when this government deadline hits, funding deadline hits, also remains to be seen.
Nicole, in the nominating speech for Mike Johnson, Elise Stefanik said that he is a friend to all, an enemy to none. Is one of the reasons Mike Johnson is the new Speaker of the House because he simply hasn't been around long enough to either offend people or create any enemies?
Well, to a certain extent, it's anything but ... anything but McCarthy, anything but Scalise, anything but Jim Jordan, anything but Tom Emmer. I mean, look, there was a sense within the conference that it might be time for a fresh face. That was certainly the concern that some members had in, for instance, elevating someone like Steve Scalise or Tom Emmer. They didn't want it to be seen as just an easy promotion for either of those two. Plus, keep in mind their proximity to former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in terms of that leadership structure. So even though he is the vice chair of the Republican conference, there is some distance in terms of leadership there. So that is potentially one reason. But at this point, to your point earlier, there also is just a collective sense of exhaustion that there is a lot of work to get done in this House, and they simply couldn't keep fighting over who the next speaker should be.
For all of your hard work these many, many days, day, midday, long into the night, Nicole Killian, we thank you very much.
You bet.
To discuss former President Donald Trump's impact on the outcome of this speaker race, CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now. Robert, your perspective on what Trump did or didn't mean in this speakership battle now resolved.
Well, former President Trump had his hand on the scale in terms of endorsing Jim Jordan, but he has control of the Republican Party in spirit, even if it's not direct. He's not running it from the courtroom in Manhattan today. But when you have now Speaker Johnson at the fore of the party, this is someone who denied the election, who was repeatedly in the trenches with Trump in 2020 and early 2021. So for Trump, it's a political victory because you don't see someone who's moving into this very important role in the country who's in any way distant from him. Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the House, might not be embracing Trump at every turn. He's not as close to Trump personally as Jim Jordan and others in the House, but he's of the Trump wing of the GOP.
And yet, those who were not regarded as Trumpian enough, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, Tom Emmer, all retain positions in senior elected positions within the House Republican Conference. So though Mike Johnson, more MAGA identified than them, sits atop it, the infrastructure is still there. The one that the hardest, most Trumpian-inspired House Republicans found insufficiently loyal to become Speaker of the House. It's still all there. And won't Johnson have to rely on it to a certain extent?
And Johnson is going to have to rely on the Trump movement to provide the kind of dollars he needs to try to hold on to the House majority next year. But this is, to me, such an indicator of where the House Republicans are. As we were discussing earlier during our special report coverage, this is a House where backbenchers, those who aren't part of the leadership, though Johnson was part of the leadership in a sense,
nominally, on the
as
edges,
vice chair.
on the edge.
But those who are backbenchers, those who come from kind of rural districts, red districts, who don't have competitive seats, who are really aligned with Trump politically, they want to run this House of Representatives. They want it in their image. They want the appropriations and spending to be how they see it, not how the party leadership sees it or how K Street sees it or, of course, the Democrats. And that leads to someone like Mike Johnson actually having this path to the speakership. They want someone who doesn't have a record because that's like them. They want someone who's not known. That's like them. And having Emmer and Scalise there is fine because they've been weakened by this process. And in Johnson, they have someone who they don't believe is going to become some kind of major
Co-opted.
newt figure
Right.
who's going to change the party in the House, but he'll be someone they can go to and say, hey, you're one of us.
Let's look at this from the Democrats' perspective for just a second. I'm sure you've received texts, I know I have today from Democrats saying, well, this 3-week process has nationalized something that is not typically nationalized. Who's the Speaker of the House? And what that means for Democrats is in their pursuit of the House majority next year, they will talk about Mike Johnson as an election denier, as someone who is, from their perspective, so opposed to abortion rights as to be almost absolutist on that. And on other issues that they will attack and make that part of their larger narrative against all Republicans seeking to claim or retain House seats.
We'll see. I mean, that is the Democratic plan at this initial moment. And you think about the past, Newt Gingrich in the 90s became such a political target because he was a celebrity politician. You've written extensively about that with your book, The Enduring Revolution. You had Nancy Pelosi 20 years ago, 15 years ago, fire Pelosi was the refrain by Republicans. She was a celebrity Speaker of the House. Mike Johnson's the anti-celebrity. He's not known by even some House Republicans. So for Democrats, they might want to define him early. But what's going
But
to be...
he's not as easily definable, if I hear you, as Jim Jordan would have been.
That's right, but we're going to have to see, how does Johnson use this new stature? Does he start going on all the shows and making speeches, becoming this figure who is right-wing and proud of it and out there? Or is he more of a low-key speaker? We've seen that in House history. Sometimes the Speaker of the House is more of a functionary, someone who's running the House for the rest of the members.
And the next couple of weeks, as you know, Robert, are going to be vital to getting some sense of what kind of speaker he's going to be, because decisions will have to be made. And the fissures within the House Republican Conference about spending, about keeping the government open, those are going to come to the fore immediately.
And it's going to be such a test for someone who doesn't have much experience, if any, at this level of politics. It's like going, respectively, from like the AAA baseball leagues to the major leagues. This is Major League Baseball when you have a government shutdown at the least on the horizon. Is he going to endure a government shutdown just months into his speakership, all while 2 wars are raging abroad? Maybe he does that. Maybe they want to take that kind of line on spending. I could see that happening. The House Republicans who back Johnson saying, well, we'll endure a fight, a shutdown for quite some time. But there's a cost to all of this in politics.
Very much so. Robert Costa, we thank you very, very much.